Hello guys, we're doing all these other predictions, so it's time for the big one. The big one everyone actually cares about. And that's the Premier League predictions. I've been doing my obscure predictions on my TikTok, but now it's for like the league predictions. We did one of these at this when the first fixtures were announced, but now we know we have a feel for things and we know how things are going to go, because Liverpool is still winning that first game of the season against Bournemouth and Aston Villa. The way Newcastle has gone so far, I mean, I'm putting a 4-1 win there for, you know what, actually, with no Martinez, I think it's going to be a crazy game. I think it'll be 3-3 actually. Insane game. Bristol and Fulham. Brighton and Fulham. What am I talking about? Just because I said your name wrong, Brighton, you can have the win. Sunderland win their first game back in the Premier League. And then Spurs beating Burnley in their first game under Frank in the Prem. City flexing their muscles in that first game. Nottingham versus Brentford, going to have a 2-2 draw because neither team's going to have the season that you expect them to have. Chelsea beating Palace in that first game, and United and Arsenal drawing 2-2 in the first game as well, and Leeds being welcomed to the Prem by Everton with a loss. West Ham continue to lose their games. We're going to have Man City and Spurs. City beating Spurs because that's what they do. Right? They're turning this other way round the other game. Bournemouth beating Wolves. Oh, where's my face going right now? Brentford getting beat by Villa, but only just because, still no Martinez. Burnley drawing Sunderland. We're going to have Arsenal beating Leeds there, getting on the wins on their board for themselves. Crystal Palace beating Nottingham. Everton and Brighton, we're going to have our first 0-0 of the year there. Fulham getting beat by United, and then Newcastle getting beat by Liverpool still, because I still don't know what's going to happen with that. All of that. Aston Villa drawing Crystal Palace. We're going to have Sunderland beating Brentford. Sunderland having a really good start to the season here. Chelsea beating Fulham, and then United beating Burnley. Some good starts here, some good starts to the season. We'll calculate in game week 5 and see where we're at then. Tottenham beating Bournemouth. Things are going pretty well for some teams right now. Wolves drawing with Everton. We're going to have Leeds getting beat by Newcastle still. We're going to have Brighton getting beat by City. It's what City do. Forest beating West Ham. And Liverpool and Arsenal drawing 2-2 in the season there, but it's good for Arsenal. It is good for Arsenal. Stuff like that. Bournemouth beating Brighton, no issues. Crystal Palace beating Sunderland. Brentford getting beat by Chelsea. We're going to have Everton beating Villa. Fulham beating Leeds, no issues there. Newcastle beating Wolves. West Ham beating Spurs there, getting their first win on the board. 3-1 for Liverpool, and City beating United and Derby. 2-0 win for Liverpool. We're going to game week 5. We're going to calculate the table after this one as Brighton and Spurs play each other, and they're finishing a 1-1 draw. Burnley getting absolutely smacked apart by Forest. We're going to have West Ham drawing with Crystal Palace. We're going to have Wolves beating Leeds. United drawing with Chelsea. We're going to have Fulham beating Brentford. Sunderland getting beat by Villa, and then Arsenal beating City. 5 games of the season. We're going to see Chelsea and Liverpool top of the table, both on 13 points without a loss on the board. Arsenal without a loss on the board as well on 11 points. And City on 12 points. Bournemouth on 9 points. United actually on 8 points. We've got 2 draws and a loss. But as of 5 games, that still sees us in 6th position there on 8 points. Leeds without anything on the board after 5 games. 5 losses straight off the bat. Burnley without a win so far as well, and Brentford without a win, just 1 point on the board. We'll see what happens like in game week 10, but a pretty fair reflection of how the league will probably look after the first 5 games. Brentford getting shown where they are by United. Villa then beating Fulham. We're going to have Crystal Palace getting a draw with Liverpool. We're going to have Chelsea beating Brighton, continuing on their path. We're going to have Leeds drawing with Bournemouth. City having a nice day out with Burnley over there. We're going to have Forest beating Sunderland. And Spurs beating Wolves. We're going to have Newcastle drawing with Arsenal. I feel like Newcastle love doing stuff like that to Arsenal. And then Everton 2-0 winning against West Ham. Bournemouth, beating Fulham there. Another win on the board for Bournemouth. Villa beating Burnley, and Arsenal walking over West Ham. 2-1 there for City. Chelsea drawing with Liverpool. Everton, another 0-0 game with Palace there, another 0-0 on the board for them. Spurs just winning that game. United only winning 2-0 against Sunderland, and then Newcastle beating Forest. Wolves and Brighton drawing 2-2. You need to give me 10 and we'll see where we're at, because Sunderland beat Wolves there. We're going to have Brighton beating Newcastle. Crystal Palace beating Bournemouth, but in a tight packed game. Burnley getting beaten by Leeds. Fulham just getting beat by Arsenal. Liverpool still beating United. We're going to have City beating Everton, and Forest getting beat by Chelsea. Spurs then drawing with Villa, and then West Ham beating Brentford. Some of these are pretty tough to call, you know, I'm not going to lie to you. Bournemouth drawing with Forest. Villa getting a result against City there, just edging the result against City. Arsenal Palace drawing. Brentford not even scoring and just conceding 6 to Liverpool. Chelsea beating Sunderland. Everton beating Spurs in a 1-0 win. Leeds beating West Ham. We're going to have United beating Brighton. Newcastle beating Fulham, and then Wolves beating Burnley. I got one more game week and then we can calculate where we're at, because Sunderland drawing with Everton. Brighton and Leeds. Brighton beating Leeds. Crystal Palace beating Brentford. Burnley getting beat by Arsenal. We're going to have Fulham drawing with Wolves. Liverpool beating Villa. City beating Bournemouth. United beating Forest. Spurs getting beaten by Chelsea. And then West Ham getting a result against Newcastle. 10 games into the season. Chelsea, Liverpool and Arsenal still yet to actually get a loss on the board. Also going the season invincible. Chelsea top of the league. Arsenal actually in 4th below City. City's having 2 losses on the board. Arsenal dropped too many points as well. Actually 2 points ahead of United. I feel like United, I feel like I've been a bit biased still, but you know, it's still there. Burnley and Brentford both without a win on the board as well. After 10 games, both only 1 point on the board. Brentford have got a few more goals in them for it, and a few less goals conceded, but it's still not been a great start for Brentford at all to the season. The only place we can do is move on now and see what it's like in game week 15, because I feel like things can still change. Sunderland losing to Arsenal. We're going to have Villa and Bournemouth drawing. We're going to have Crystal Palace actually beating Brighton. A big win there for them. Brentford drawing with Newcastle. We're going to have Chelsea beating Wolves. We're going to have Everton beating Fulham. We're going to have City beating Liverpool. So Liverpool finally got lost on the board. Forest beating Leeds. We're going to have United draw 2-2 with Spurs, and then West Ham beating Burnley, where Burnley is still struggling for any sort of points. Bournemouth then beating West Ham. We're going to have Brighton beating Brentford. Arsenal drawing with Chelsea, drawing with Spurs. Sorry, another one that's just not working for them. 3-1 there for Chelsea. Fulham and Sunderland. Fulham to beat Sunderland. Liverpool to beat Forest. Leeds to draw with Villa. United beating Everton. Newcastle drawing with City, and then Wolves beating Palace. I think these are fair, as Sunderland and Bournemouth draw. Bournemouth got a long journey to go there. Excuse me, Jesus Christ. Aston Villa beating Wolves. Crystal Palace beating United. Brentford beating Burnley. Finally get a win on the board for themselves there. Chelsea just beating Arsenal. Everton, another 0-0 draw. Another 0-0 draw on the board for Everton there against Newcastle, as City beating Leeds. City will beat Leeds. City will beat them. 3-1 there for Forest against Brighton, as Fulham and Spurs draw, and then a big win for Liverpool there. Bournemouth beating Everton. Brighton beating Aston Villa. Arsenal beating Brentford. Burnley drawing with Palace. We're going to have Fulham getting beat by City still. Liverpool win the games that need to win there. We're going to have 3-2 win there for Chelsea. 3-0 win for United. Newcastle beating Spurs, and then Wolves beating Forest. One more game we can calculate right as Bournemouth get winning against Chelsea. Big stuff, guys. Villa and Arsenal draw. Brighton beating West Ham. Everton beating Forest. Fulham beating Palace, I think is fair. Leeds getting by Liverpool. City beating Sunderland. Newcastle beating Burnley. Spurs beating Brentford, and United beating Wolves. 15 games of the season now. Chelsea still top of the late table on 38 points. It's a very close 38, 37, 36 between Chelsea, City and Liverpool. Arsenal and United are trying the same amount of points, both on 30 points. Bournemouth not far behind, Palace not far behind. Villa and Newcastle and Everton make up the rest of the top 10. Spurs still in 12th, but not doing too bad for themselves. Burnley on 2 points. 15 games into the season. Very, very poor. Sunderland, Newcastle. Sunderland getting a huge win in the first Tyneside derby in the Premier League for a long time. Crystal Palace getting a win against City as well. Arsenal beating Wolves. Brentford beating Leeds as they try to make their push away. Burnley drawing with Fulham. Chelsea still win their games. Still wins there. 2-0. See, United play, man. I'm just playing better. Forest beating Tottenham, and then West Ham getting a result against Villa. Give me 90s. We're going to calculate next again. Villa beating United. Brighton drawing with Sunderland. Arsenal and Everton drawing 0-0 again. Just really, really poor. The U-shaped football's not working. 2-1 win there. Leeds drawing with Palace. City beating winning games there. Newcastle beating Chelsea. Spurs and Liverpool drawing as Wolves win their game against Brentford. Sunderland winning against Leeds. Crystal Palace beating Spurs. Arsenal beating Brighton. Brentford drawing with Bournemouth. Burnley beating Everton. Big win there from actually. Chelsea getting a win against Villa. We see Liverpool win their game there. United drawing with Newcastle. Forest getting beat by City. And then West Ham beating Fulham. One more game we can calculate where we are at 19 games into the season. Crystal Palace win their games. Arsenal still win their games. Brentford drawing with Spurs. Burnley getting beat by Newcastle. Chelsea beating Bournemouth. Liverpool beating Leeds. United beating Wolves. Forest beating Everton. And West Ham beating Brighton. Calculate the table after that. We're going to see some big changes to the table, to be fair. United still in 5th place, which is nice to see. Chelsea still top of the table. Liverpool in 2nd on joint points with City. Both have got their 3 different paths, but they're both there, and they're both doing what they need to do to be there. Arsenal, City and Liverpool all only conceded 19 goals so far in the season as well. Everton's only conceded 20, and United actually on 23. Burnley conceded 50 goals. They've lost Pope. I told you they relied a lot on Pope last year, and I don't think they've improved the team at all. Brentford, Leeds and Burnley all in the relegation zone. Sunderland actually in 15th, a bit away from the relegation zone. I mean, it's only 9 points, but hey, it's steps that help them towards their safety. West Ham actually the same amount of points as Spurs and Brighton. Spurs with a positive goal difference again, despite being the bottom half of the table. What, Spurs, what are you doing, pal? What are you doing? Bournemouth, first game of the second half of the season, and Bournemouth beat Arsenal there. Aston Villa drawing with Forest as Brighton beat Burnley. Everton beating Brentford, and Fulham getting beat by Liverpool. United walking over Leeds. City beating Chelsea. Huge game in terms of like the title there. Newcastle and Crystal Palace drawing 2-2 as Spurs beat Sunderland. And Wolves beat West Ham. We're gonna, delve into that in a second as Bournemouth won their game against Spurs. Crystal Palace beating Aston Villa. Arsenal beating Liverpool. Huge for Arsenal, that is. Brentford beating Sunderland. Could be huge for them as United win their game against Burnley. Everton win their game against Wolves. We're gonna see Fulham win their game against Chelsea. And Chelsea season starts to fall apart at this point. With a pile on of everything added up, it's maybe falling apart a little bit for them. Newcastle beating Leeds, and then West Ham drawing with Forest. Sunderland beating Crystal Palace, huge result. Aston Villa beating Everton. Brighton beating Bournemouth. We're going to have Chelsea beating Brentford as they try and get back on their horse. Liverpool win their game. Leeds beating Fulham. United beating City in the derby. We're going to have Forest getting beat by Arsenal. Spurs beating West Ham, and Wolves beating Newcastle. You know, they're all trying to get away from the relegation. Game of 28 is when we're going to calculate the game next to see where we're at with that. Bournemouth drawing. No, getting beat by Liverpool. Bournemouth getting beat by Liverpool. Crystal Palace and Chelsea drawing. United getting beat by Arsenal. Brentford beating Forest. Burnley getting beat by Spurs. Everton beating Leeds. These are fair ones. You know, Fulham beating Brighton. City win their game there. Newcastle, yeah. And then West Ham win their game against Sunderland. They're trying to make their push away from the relegation zone. Sunderland win another game, though. Sunderland win another game. That's another push away. That's all they can do right now, because Brighton beating Everton is good for them. Chelsea winning their game. Liverpool and Newcastle draw. Leeds getting beat by Arsenal. United win their game against Fulham. Forest beating Palace. And then Spurs beating City, because that's what Spurs do. And then Wolves win their game against Bournemouth. Bournemouth then beating Villa. Brighton and Palace in a 2-0 win there for Brighton. Drops Palace off. Arsenal in their game. Burnley and West Ham drawing 0-0. Fulham beat Everton 3-1. 1-1 between Liverpool and City. 0-0 between Leeds and Forest. United beating Spurs finally, and then Newcastle beating Brentford. Wolves getting beat by Chelsea. Another win there. Liverpool, you know, on a bit of a rampage now, knowing what they need to do. Keep him doing what they need to do. Chelsea drawing. Chelsea beating Leeds. Everton drawing with Bournemouth. City beating Fulham. We're going to have Forest drawing with Wolves. We're going to have Spurs and Newcastle draw, and then United winning against West Ham. Game of 28 is we're going to calculate next and see where we're at. Sunderland drawing with Fulham. Villa beating Leeds. Crystal Palace beating Wolves. Brentford for a 1-0 win against Brighton. Chelsea beating Burnley. Everton beaten by United. City winning their game. Forest getting beat by Liverpool as Spurs win their game against Arsenal, and West Ham draw with Bournemouth. It's all keeping it close down there. It's all keeping it close as Brighton beat Forest. Arsenal beating Chelsea. Burnley drawing with Brentford. Big game that. Big game for the both of them. Fulham beating Spurs. We're going to have Liverpool and West Ham play each other, and Liverpool are going to walk over them. Leeds getting walked over by City. United just beating Palace. Newcastle beating Everton. And then Wolves and Villa drawing. 10 games left to go. Liverpool on top of the table on 66 points. They could be doing it again. City just 1 point behind them. I mean, United are still pretty close. United only 5 points on the top. 16 points out of Palace, because the rest of the table kind of dropped away. You can see that is a classification gap there. Jesus Christ! Literally in 5 games' time, the top 5 could be decided, which would be an insane thing and a very unrealistic thing. Burnley on 8 points, 3 points off. Not joining on that record. Brentford still in relegation zone. West Ham, Sunderland, catchable. Wolves catchable. Forest catchable. Spurs now in the top half of the table, where they probably deserve to be, on 38 points. Things can still change the rest of the season, as Bournemouth beating Brentford there. Villa beating Chelsea is a big one. Brighton getting beat by Arsenal. Everton beating Burnley, and then we're going to have Fulham beating, and then Leeds beating Sunderland to try and push Leeds away from where they are. Newcastle beating United. We're going to have Spurs beating Palace, and then we're going to have Wolves get a draw against Liverpool. Sunderland beating Brighton, and have a huge win for Sunderland, that is. Crystal Palace beating Leeds. We're going to have Arsenal beating, we're going to have Brentford just beating Wolves in a tightly met match. Chelsea drawing with Newcastle. Liverpool beating Spurs. United drawing with Villa. We're going to have Forest drawing with Fulham, and then West Ham getting beat by City. Bournemouth beating United. We're going to have Villa and Villa just beat West Ham. Brighton beating Liverpool. We're going to have another 0-0 draw between Everton and Chelsea there. Everton's just king of the nil-nils, aren't they? Leeds and Brentford drawing. Not good for Brentford. They're trying to push away, but it's sometimes the gap's too strong. City dropping points to Palace there. Newcastle finally winning in the Tyneside derby. And Spurs beating Forest. Wolves getting beat by Arsenal. Give me 33 and we'll calculate again. Spurs winning their games. Crystal Palace drawing Newcastle. No, Crystal Palace getting beat by Newcastle there. As Arsenal beat Bournemouth. Brentford beating Everton. Huge result. Brighton win their game. We're going to have Chelsea beating City. Is huge for the end of the season here. And Liverpool beating Fulham. United walking over Leeds, as we like to do. Forest beating Villa. And then West Ham drawing with Wolves. One more game we can calculate again in a second. Crystal Palace win their game against West Ham. Brentford beating Fulham. Chelsea beating United towards the end of the season. Another 0-0. Everton, knowing how to get the points off them. Leeds beating Wolves. City beating Arsenal. We have Newcastle beating Bournemouth. Forest beating Burnley. And then, Spurs beating Brighton. 5 games to go. City now top of the table. City now 10 points clear of United in 5th there. United actually 9 points clear of Newcastle now. United are the gap protectors. As Chelsea are only 4 points off top of the table, Liverpool are 1 point off it, and Arsenal it's horse to decide for in the final 5 games. A lot of teams can still be going for it. Relegation still to be decided. West Ham now in the relegation zone, level points with Sunderland. 1 point away is Brentford. 2 points away is Wolves. Nottingham Forest are a point away from safe there. Fulham are basically safe, but we're waiting to see what can happen. Burnley still deep in the relegation zone. Burnley are definitely gone. Leeds could still survive. Will they survive? We don't know. We've got 5 games to go and we'll see where we're at after that. As Bournemouth beat Leeds, closing the gap. Forest and Sunderland drawing. Brighton beating Chelsea. Big game from that. Arsenal beating Newcastle. We're going to have City just beating Burnley. Fulham beating Villa. Liverpool drawing with Palace, and United beating Brentford. Not good for Brentford at all. That West Ham clawing their way away from the relegation zone with a win there, and then Spurs losing their game. Bournemouth beating Crystal Palace. We're going to have Villa drawing with Spurs. Arsenal winning against Fulham there. We're going to have Brentford beating West Ham. That's a necessary win for Brentford, to be fair. Chelsea beating Forest. Everton getting beat by City. Leeds beating Burnley. I said it's still possible. United beating Liverpool. Newcastle beating Brighton. Oh my god, how did I almost get that one messed up? Wolves beating Sunderland. 3 games to go now. 3 games to go. City are still top of the table. It's still a lot. It's still close. It's still close. United can win the league. Damn, that's so upsetting. Sunderland are in the relegation zone now. 2 points behind West Ham. 3 points behind Brentford. Forest and Wolves still not safe. Still could get relegated. We're waiting to see what happens. Leeds could still survive as well. Sunderland lose to United. Brighton beating Wolves. Crystal Palace drawing with Everton. We're going to have Burnley getting beat by Villa. Fulham beating Bournemouth. Liverpool and Chelsea drawing towards the end of the season is not good for them. 3-1 then for City. Forest and Newcastle drawing. Newcastle win the game. And then Spurs beating Leeds. Arsenal beating West Ham. Bournemouth and City towards the end of the season now. 3-1 win there for City. 2-1 win for Villa. As Arsenal win their game, and probably changes for the last day of the season there. Brentford drawing with Crystal Palace. Chelsea beating Spurs. Everton beating Sunderland. Leeds beating Brighton. United beating Forest in their game, and then Newcastle beating West Ham, and Wolves drawing with Fulham. We're going to calculate the table on the last day of the season here. Sunderland still in relegation zone. Brentford are now safe. It is down to Sunderland or West Ham to see who gets relegated on the last day there. Liverpool are now in fifth spot. United now in 4th, just ahead of them. Newcastle in 65 points, 11 points off of the top 5. Bournemouth are up there. Spurs finishing the top half of the season. That's the improvement that they want this season. Final day of the season, Sunderland beating Chelsea to try and survive. United beating Brighton. Crystal Palace and Arsenal drawing on the last day. Burnley beating Wolves, who had a poor season. Fulham beating Newcastle, who aren't had the greatest of seasons either. Liverpool beating, we need to beat, and then City and Los Angeles Villa, they do what they do, and Los Angeles Villa don't really manage to get the result that they need to get, as Forest are beaten by Bournemouth. Spurs beat Everton, and West Ham and Leeds draw 2-2, meaning Sunderland survived on the last day thanks to goal difference. West Ham, Leeds and Burnley all relegated. City in the league on 87 points, Arsenal second on 86, United actually finishing third on 80 points with 25 wins, 5 draws and 8 losses. See, it wasn't harsh on losses either. I mean, 8 losses is still quite a few. It's half what we got last year, but you know, just changing them draws into wins basically. Liverpool on 79 points, Chelsea on 78, and then Newcastle will be getting Europa League, and I said Bournemouth getting Europa League, and then Spurs getting in the Conference League. So another European season for Spurs, finishing 8th there, 57 points, not too bad. Villa on 57, Crystal Palace getting 56, isn't bad either. Brighton on 50, Fulham 48, Everton 43. So survival on the last day there, a lot closer than Brentford would like to be. Forest back to the way you'd expect Forest to finish, to be honest. Wolves, yeah, that's fine. Sunderland survived on the last day though, 43 goals scored. I mean, that's what you get. And then Burnley had a joint lowest point record ever, thanks to, you know, winning the last day against Wolves. Yeah, that is my Prem predictions, and you know, it's predictions that I'm okay with. No one breaking the 100 goals either. You know, Liverpool and City both scoring out plenty of goals, but a good season. It's a good season for it. That is my predictions. Let me know your predictions down in the comments, and yeah, let's see where we go from there.